So my name is Jesse Himmelstein. I work at the CRI Game Lab, and I'm also a co-founder of the Gamedier, runs a bunch of cool game events in Paris. So please come by sometime on a Monday night if you're free. Okay, so first off, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's helped organize it. Thank you to Nico, and thank you to Mozilla. Thank you to Jamshaker. Thank you for Games for Change, and Simon, who will probably talk at the end, and also everyone else who came to speak. And thank you very much for everyone who come out for this jam. I'm really, really excited about this. I've been really excited for a while. So I think it's going to be a really great weekend. Okay, so just real quick, when we talk about diversity, I'm fairly new to talking about diversity, right? So I'm a white guy. I have a lot of privilege in my life, so I'm not probably the best person to talk about diversity in general. That's why we have other people who can talk a bit more about what it actually feels like. But I guess when we've started working on this project, the first thing I noticed is just how many different types of diversity there is, right? So there's kind of like the big ones you tend to think of, like gender and religion, and then you get to ethnicity, and then sexuality, and then disability, and age, and wealth, education, where you come from, your ancestry, like who your parents were, what they taught you at home, and then I think the list could just go on and on and on. And when you think about diversity in Europe, so I tried to look for some statistics. These are a little bit old, but still, it's interesting. You find that basically people hang out with other people that are like them, right? So this is nothing new. So this is statistics from Europe. So you see that basically only, let's see, this means that 41% of people in 2012 had acquaintances who were gay or bisexual. And for people, and so depending on the type of diverse difference that you're looking at, these numbers change quite a bit, but they're fairly low. So people are segregated, and we in this project that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, we're focusing on not so much in Europe but in India, and India is really, really interesting. So I just like to. I found this quote really fantastic. This is from a excellent podcast run on BBC Radio about called. Incarnations, if anyone's interested. Okay, so it starts talking about women, the place of women in India. It said, imagine that Indian women were a country unto themselves. Let's call it the Women's Republic of India. With a population of about 600 million, this new state would be the world's third largest, just a little smaller than male India. On the latest available UN Human Development Index, it would rank between Myanmar and Rwanda. Now let's focus on average years of schooling. The Republic would be at 3.2 years, neck and neck with Mozambique. As for per capita income, hold on to your hat as Ivory Coast and Papua New Guinea leave our new nation in the dust. It's sobering to see what a tripling of India's GDP since the year 2000 has failed to do for its women. And so in India, in addition to all the challenges you find all over, you have a lot of other challenges that are more specific. So you have the caste system, which although illegal is still there. It's still very, very present. You have a lot of tensions, ethnic tensions and religious tensions. You have what is basically a two-tier educational system. So there is public education for everyone, but if you don't have money, then you don't go to a private school. And it's only the private schools that are actually going to get you somewhere professionally. That's why also it accounts for why there's such little schooling. There's very little support for poor people in general, and yet there's so many people, right? So it's the second largest country in the world right now, and it is scheduled to become the first largest country in not too long. It'll probably take over China if the trend continues. And I found it really interesting, like, for example, the people we're meeting when we went to India, who were people really working on social issues, they still had, when we talked about marriage, for example, they still had really their family said, okay, you can marry whoever you want, as long as they're the same religion, the same caste, and the same social class, right? So they have a different idea of who you're allowed to mix with than we probably would. And in this project, we're focusing on the workplace. So why the workplace? Well, first of all, we spend a lot of time at work, but it also determines, our standard of living, and it gives inspirations for the next generation about who works. So if you see somebody who looks like you, who has a particular job, you might think, well, that's something I can do. And you might not even think about it, consciously, but it definitely plays a role. And this is interesting. So if you get good diversity in the workplace, it's good for the people who are getting those jobs, but it's also good for the workplace. And that's something interesting, too, to focus on. Because it's been proven that when you bring people from different points of view, it may be harder for them to work together at first. Like, it's not as easy because you don't necessarily have the same references, the same background, the same shared culture. But the kind of solutions that you come up with are much more robust because you're attacking problems from really different points of view. And that's something you don't get if you have everyone who basically have the same experience. Okay, so games. So obviously, I don't feel like with a single game we're gonna tackle all of India's diversity problems. But I think we can play a role with games. So games have been shown to raise awareness about problems, to create empathy between people, which is very important. I think a really interesting. I like the third one about simulation, right? So something we can do in games that we can't do in many other media is kind of imagine what it was like. Give the player control of some kind of simulation about policy choices or choices even that a single person makes and play out what happens if they make those choices. And finally, bringing people together in ways that other media can't. So this project's called IncLudo, and we're partnered with this really cool group called ZMQ. So the nonprofit in India who does mobile health applications, who does a lot of interactive storytelling, and this thing called the Rural Games Lab, which is really cool. So basically they travel out to really kind of like excluded villages out in the countryside in India. And they do workshops there with people where they're doing basically game jams, right? But game jams with people who not only probably never created a game, but they're most likely to be illiterate. And so they actually get those people to create a game and they take their stories, and then as much as possible, they then actually bring that into their mobile games that they then distribute for free. So people can, there's a way that I'm really taking inspiration directly from the people who they want to address, which I find really, really cool. All right, so for us at the CRI, this jam is part of that IncLudo project, but obviously it's more than that. And for us, it's about gathering inspiration. The kind of ideas that people are going to come up with over the weekend is really cool to also spread the word about what we're doing and hopefully to build a community, not just around IncLudo, but just around the more general idea of building games around diversity. Okay, so just really quickly, I wanted to talk about a few games that have already been done. So you can do them again if you want, but it might be interesting to do something else. So probably the three biggest games that I've been able to find around diversity are these three. So Lim is a game, let's see, maybe I can, let me see if I can show off this. I think I have to go like that. So Lim is this game where you control a square, okay, and you move it around. And then at some point you start changing colors, right? And then as you move through, when you enter a room, it seems to choose a color. And so if you're the same color as everyone else, it's fine, as other blocks. But sometimes you won't be the same color as everyone else. Let's see, oh no, I'm the same color as everyone else. Okay, this is a really bad demo, but it's not even my game, so it's okay. Oh, okay, there we go. So, oh shoot. Oh no, come on. Oh yeah. So it starts attacking you. And then the only way you can avoid being attacked is pressing this button that makes you blend in, which is not working. And you see, as you blend in, it gives you this really claustrophobic feeling. So here, even though I'm not being attacked, I'm being kind of tightened or something. Anyway. Another really interesting one is called Parable of the Polygons. So this is it's kind of like, they call it, explorable explanation. Thank you very much. This is by Nikki Case. It's really cool too. And they've basically taken a scientific paper around segregation and turned it into kind of an interactive explanation. So it's really cool. So you go along and they explain how there's polygons, there's only two kinds, there's squares and there's triangles, and squares like to have at least some of the other people around them be squares, and then triangles don't like to be only around squares. They want to have a few triangles so they can be mixed like this, right? And then everyone's happy. But what happens when you have a whole group like this? So you're like, okay, well, this square is not happy, so I'm going to move him over here, and that's going to make happy, so I can move him. But eventually, as you start moving things around, you're going to create, of course, you have other ones who become unhappy. So when you move this in here, well, then this one becomes happy, but then this one's unhappy, and then you have to move this one. And, they can have a computer do this for you. And so when you start out with kind of a random board, when you start calculating it to what makes people happy, systematically, the polygons segregate themselves. right, in a very natural way. And that's really cool because it's not that they only want it. It's not like the squares don't want to be around the triangles. They don't care. But they want to have a certain percentage that are like them. And just that effect is enough to have it be segregated. So it's really cool. And they take this a little farther and they develop a lot more. I guess the third game is called Wildfire, who I haven't played, so I don't know so much about it. But it's basically about gathering people to join your cause. So you kind of control this guy moving around and you try to get other people to work on your cause for you. And it's kind of more about social organization. All right. Let's go back here. So when we were in India last time, we didn't do full game jams like here, but we did some what we call micro jams when we bring out all that prototyping equipment, all the little things to play with, to make board games with. And we did this with students and a company. And I just wanted to talk about really quickly the ideas that came out of there that I thought were the most interesting. So these are people who are not game designers, right? But still. So they have, one of them was called Mish, and it was basically a religion trivia game. So they took the initials Mish is for Muslim, and then I is for the Hindi word for Christianity, the Sikh religion, and Hinduism. And basically, you just had to answer questions about the different religions. And it was really interesting for someone who wasn't really particularly religious in any of them, how quickly you learn through that kind of thing. Even though as a game, it's very simple. There was a similar type of game about guessing where people were from in India. So in New Delhi, where we were, there were people from all over. And so they were just trying to guess, what city the other people were from by asking indirect questions about what they ate and, things about their family and stuff like that. And finally, there was games about perception, about the difference between how you perceive yourself and how other people perceive you. And I found what's interesting about all those games is they're basically icebreakers, right? So in themselves, again, they're not really interesting games, but in that social context, they get people to start talking about their differences and also about, hopefully about the larger issue about how those differences have had an effect on them. Another just last thing I want to talk about, this is very old work and it's not a game, but I don't know if people have heard of this before, the blue eyes, brown eyes experiment. This is kind of famous in social psychology, I think, at least in the US. And basically what this school grade teacher after, I think the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated, had this idea, was thinking how she wanted to talk about what it meant, right? Which is a huge historical event. And the kids, had no idea because they were all white kids in a rural area where everyone was white. And so she was saying, and she had this quote, when white people sit down to discuss racism, what they are experiencing is shared ignorance because there's nothing to talk about, right? So if you get a bunch of people who are the same or have something similar, they can't talk about what it feels like to be discriminated against. And so she came up with an experiment where she declared Monday morning that the blue-eyed kids were smarter than the brown-eyed kids. And she explained that if you were brown-eyed, you weren't as smart, you were dirty, you smelled, and all those kind of things. And then she started bringing only the blue-eyed kids could sit in the front of the class. And it's crazy. So within a week, you had the test scores of the brown-eyed kids were going down and down and down. And they would only hang out with each other. The blue-eyed kids would stop hanging out with the brown-eyed kids because they weren't as good. And then the next week she switched it and she said the brown-eyed kids are now superior to the blue-eyed kids. And that worked too. That had the effect you would think. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And this actually gave rise to what's called diversity training. And they started doing that in workplaces. Although I don't think they did this kind of experiment because I think nowadays this kind of thing would be seen as a little too emotionally disturbing. So this is the same time in the 60s when they were doing the Stanford prison experiments and the Milgram's electroshock. I don't know if you know. I'm fascinated by this kind of stuff. But once again, you can't do that now anymore. But maybe you could do that in a game. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to simulate that. Just a little idea. All right, so I'm saying all this. Obviously, you don't have to make games about India. You don't have to make games about a particular diversity that I've talked about. Do whatever you want. But I think it would be really cool if you take this opportunity to explore kind of new ideas and do something that's a little different that's been done so far. And of course, we're always welcome if you want to join our community and follow along with the IncLudo project. We're on the internet. Right, there you go. Okay, thank you very much.